The Solar Sovereignty Doctrine. Year 2355. A tense quiet had descended upon the solar system. The neutralization of the Unsanctioned Network in 2354 had restored a fragile digital peace, but the underlying political turmoil persisted. Omnicorp Ventures, though publicly shamed and financially wounded, remained a lurking threat, its CEO, Silas Thorne, undoubtedly plotting new strategies. The MSA's authority in solar space had been severely eroded, its impotence exposed. NAAA's standing, while high due to its decisive actions, was viewed with growing suspicion by some powerful Earth-based blocs who resented its burgeoning independence. The present frame timeline was 2355. On Yggdrasil, Chief Astrid Vinter II knew this was not a time for complacency. The destruction of Omnicorp's rogue network had left a strategic vacuum, creating an urgent, undeniable need for comprehensive governance in solar space. Public and corporate pressure mounted on the MSA for stability, for clarity. This moment, Astrid realized, was an opportunity. NAAA had proved its capability. Now it must help shape the future of deep space law, ensuring that the hard-won autonomy of the frontier would not be swallowed by Earth-centric bureaucracy. The MSA, under the beleaguered chairman Jian Li, was desperate to regain control of the narrative. Under immense pressure from all sides, Li reluctantly proposed the creation of a solar sovereignty doctrine to the MSA Council. He framed it as a necessary evil, a new comprehensive framework designed to prevent future chaos and restore order. His public address acknowledged the inadequacy of existing laws, hinting at the need for radical change. Initial drafts of the proposed doctrine, circulated to all signatory powers and major orbital entities, were heavily Earth-centric. They called for the mandatory extension of Earth-based law into solar space, proposing universal licensing for all deep space operations and significant resource levies on all extraterrestrial mining. These proposals clearly aimed to centralize control back on Earth, effectively turning deep space operations into extensions of terrestrial interests. The independent orbital habitats, including Yggdrasil, immediately saw these drafts as a new form of colonial extraction, designed to stifle their growth and siphon their hard-won profits. Eric Hansen, NAAA's chief negotiator, worked tirelessly with Astrid to formulate NAAA's counter-proposal. Their vision was a tiered system of governance. It recognized established deep space operational zones, enshrined resource acquisition rights based on proven investment and risk, and advocated for a decentralized enforcement model that leveraged NAAA's unique capabilities. Eric skillfully utilized the public opinion, carefully cultivated by NAAA's media campaigns during the Omnicorp conflict, to rally support. He highlighted NAAA's decades of pioneering, its role as a responsible steward of the orbital environment, and its unmatched ability to operate effectively in the harsh realities of deep space. The core fracture within humanity's expansion became brutally clear during the initial negotiations. Earth-based blocs, clinging to their historical authority, viewed NAAA's proposals as a blatant land grab, an audacious assertion of independence that threatened the fragile unity of the Unification Accords. They painted NAAA as an unregulated entity, a wild card threatening the stability of the entire solar system. NAAA, conversely, saw Earth's proposals as an attempt to stifle innovation, to control resources from afar, and to ignore the very real dangers and investments inherent in deep space operations. The philosophical divide was stark: centralized control versus decentralized autonomy. The negotiations were held in a neutral orbital station, a massive, gleaming habitat known as Unity Nexus, designed precisely for such multilateral talks. It was a space where political theater often overshadowed genuine progress. Chairman Li, flanked by his legal and political advisors, opened the first session with a solemn declaration of the need for cooperation. Yet, behind the polished words, the air crackled with thinly veiled hostility. The still stand was immediate and absolute. Earth blocs, led by a coalition of traditional powers like the Pan-European Union and the American Commonwealth, refused to budge on mandatory centralized licensing. They argued that NAAA's autonomous swarm logistics, while effective, posed an uncontrolled military threat if not properly regulated by a global authority. They pointed to NAA's covert actions during the Omnicorp incident as proof of its willingness to operate outside established norms. NAA's Eric Hansen meticulously dismantled their arguments, presenting reams of data on the transparency of ASL's non-kinetic applications, its defensive programming, and its essential role in maintaining NAA's self-sufficiency. He highlighted the MSA's failure to act during the Omnicorp incursions, arguing that NAA's actions were born of necessity, not aggression. "We were forced to act, Chairman, where your authority was absent. Our capabilities are a solution, not a problem, to governance in the void." The debates grew heated, often spilling into public forums. The media, both Earth-based and orbital, amplified every heated exchange, every subtle power play. The concept of frontier justice versus global oversight became a pervasive theme. It was during this gridlock that new factions began to emerge. Other independent orbital habitats, having watched NAA's victories and experienced the MSA's ineffectiveness, began to form their own loose alliances. From the industrial zones of the lunar colonies, established since 2257, came strong voices concerned that their limited autonomy would be further eroded by Earth-centric laws. Mining outposts in the asteroid belt, populated by independent prospectors and small corporate entities, demanded protection for their claims and a say in how deep space was governed. These disparate groups, often with conflicting interests themselves, united under a common banner, a desire for greater autonomy and a fear of Earth's overreach. They looked to NAAA, to Astrid Vinter too, as their champion. Astrid, working closely with Eric, recognized the strategic importance of these new alliances. The MSA may hold the historical power, Eric, but the true economic and operational power is shifting to deep space. We need to leverage that. We need to show them that a truly effective solar sovereignty doctrine cannot be written without us, or against us. Technical working groups were established, ostensibly to hash out the practical implementation of the doctrine. But these quickly became new battlegrounds. How would laws be enforced across millions of cubic kilometers of solar space? What were the precise boundaries of jurisdiction? How would non-compliant entities be brought to heel? This was where NAA's technological solutions, its autonomous swarm logistics, and its deep space sensor nets became critical bargaining chips. Lars and Alera presented detailed proposals for a decentralized enforcement model. They argued that NAA's ASL drones, capable of vast patrols, non-kinetic interdiction, and complex data collection, were the only viable means to maintain order across the immense distances of solar space. They demonstrated how ASL could identify and track rogue actors, enforce traffic regulations, and conduct environmental monitoring far more effectively than any centralized MSA fleet could hope to. The trade-off: NAA would be the primary executor of these enforcement actions, effectively making it the de facto deep space police force in many sectors. This was a bitter pill for Earth-based powers to swallow. Chairman Li, seeing his fragile doctrine fracturing, attempted to broker a genuine compromise. He met privately with Astrid and Eric, acknowledging the MSA's operational limitations. Eric, under Astrid's firm but diplomatic guidance, identified key leverage points. He reminded Li of Omnicorp's continued threat, the possibility of new rogue networks emerging, and the escalating risk of open conflict if no stable framework was agreed upon. He subtly emphasized NAA's unique deep space security and cleanup capabilities, its ASL as the only viable long-range enforcement mechanism, and the growing economic and political independence of the orbital habitats. He presented a stark choice: an uneasy partnership with NAA or continued chaos. Behind the scenes, political maneuvering was intense. Veiled threats of economic sanctions against NAA were met with counter-threats of complete withdrawal from all MSA cleanup operations. Promises of lucrative trade deals with NAA's advanced material processing were dangled before neutral parties. Scientific cooperation proposals were exchanged, designed to build bridges where political ones had burned. Astrid and Eric skillfully played the long game, exposing the inherent self-interest of Earth blocks while advocating for more equitable, yet still NAAA favorable system. Finally, after months of grueling negotiations, a new version of the Solar Sovereignty Doctrine was proposed. It was a document born of compromise, a patchwork of concessions and hard-won victories. Key elements included tiered jurisdiction. The MSA maintained ultimate regulatory authority closer to Earth, but delegated significant autonomous governance and enforcement powers to deep space entities for specified operational zones, based on demonstrated capability and proven investment. This legitimized NAAA's Solar Zone Defense Initiative and its Vinter claims. Resource allocation. A revised framework for deep space resource claims moved beyond first come, first served. It prioritized entities with established operational infrastructure and long-term investment, but still mandated a small percentage of strategic resources for the MSA Deep Space Resource Pool. Deep Space Security Council, a new permanent body was formed, with NAAA holding a prominent and powerful position to advise on enforcement, manage cyber threats in solar space, and mediate disputes. This ensured NAAA's seat at the table, shaping future policies. Cybersecurity protocols. Mandatory. Unified protocols for all deep space networks were established, leveraging NAAA's ASL principles and expertise, ensuring a more secure digital environment. The doctrine passed, but only after fierce debate and significant concessions from all sides. It was not a perfect document, but a functional one, reflecting the new realities of a solar system no longer governed solely from Earth. On Yggdrasil, Astrid Vinter II reviewed the final accords. Her great-grandmother, Astrid Vinter I, had laid the foundations for NAAA's independence and its modular, resilient way of life. Now, 2 centuries later, Astrid II had helped lay the foundations for its political future. Eric Hansen, looking weary but satisfied, stood beside her. "It's a beginning, Chief," he said. "The fractured peace, but a peace nonetheless." Astrid gazed out at the stars, a silent testament to the vastness that still lay unexplored. "A beginning," she agreed. "And a clear message that while Earth may unite on paper, true sovereignty in the void is earned, not given." The Solar Sovereignty Doctrine is a framework, Eric, but the real laws of deep space will always be written by those who dare to live and build within it. The sun, a distant, benevolent star, cast its light on Yggdrasil, a beacon of autonomy and ambition. The struggle for humanity's future was not over. It had merely formalized its many battlegrounds. The deep space frontier had its laws now, carved out not by unified decree, but by the relentless pressures and hard-won victories of those who called it home. The fractures remained, but within them, the seeds of a new, complex order had finally taken root.